This is the surreal and terrifying story of Lake Peigneur, Louisiana, a peaceful afternoon that turned into one of the most spectacular engineering disasters in American history. To tell this story properly, we have to look at two worlds: the surface of the lake and the massive labyrinth of salt hidden deep beneath it. The calm before the vortex. In 1980, Lake Peigneur was a shallow, freshwater body of water, averaging only about 10 feet deep. It was a local treasure, home to the beautiful Live Oak Gardens Botanical Park and a quiet spot for fishermen. On the morning of November 20th, 1980, a drilling rig owned by the Wilson Brothers Corporation, under contract for Texaco, was stationed in the center of the lake. Their goal was simple: drill for oil. They were searching near a salt dome, a massive underground pillar of salt. Geologists knew that oil often gets trapped along the edges of these domes, making them prime targets for exploration. The drill that wouldn't budge. At around 6 a.m., the crew was 1,200 feet down when the drill bit got stuck. This wasn't necessarily a cause for panic. Drills get stuck often, but as they tried to loosen it, they heard loud, rhythmic popping sounds. Suddenly, the entire 150-foot-tall drilling rig began to tilt. The crew didn't wait to find out why. They abandoned the platform, scrambling into boats and racing for the shore. It was a life-saving decision. Within minutes, the massive steel structure didn't just fall. It vanished. Even though the lake was only 10 feet deep, the rig disappeared completely beneath the surface. The bathtub drain of the century. What happened next looked like a scene from a big-budget disaster movie. A massive whirlpool began to form at the site of the drilling rig. Because the lake was so shallow and the hole beneath it was growing so fast, the whirlpool became a violent vortex. It acted like a giant drain in a bathtub. The power of the suction was so immense that it began to pull in everything. It swallowed 11 barges that were parked on the lake. It ate the botanical garden, pulling trees, soil, and a greenhouse into the depths. The most mind-boggling part? The Delcambre Canal, which usually flowed out of the lake toward the Gulf of Mexico, actually reversed direction. Because the lake was emptying so fast into the earth, it created a vacuum that pulled salt water from the Gulf back inland. This created a temporary 150-foot waterfall, the tallest in Louisiana's history, as the canal emptied backward into the disappearing lake. 1,300 feet below, the mine disaster. While the chaos unfolded on the surface, an even more terrifying drama was happening directly underneath the water. Beneath Lake Peigneur sat the Diamond Crystal Salt Mine. For decades, miners had been carving out massive caverns of salt. On that morning, 55 miners were working in tunnels as deep as 1,500 feet. Suddenly, they heard a roar like a freight train. They saw fuel drums floating in water that was rapidly rising. They knew the golden rule of salt mining: water is the enemy. Salt dissolves almost instantly in fresh water. If the mine flooded, the salt pillars holding up the roof would melt, and the entire mountain would collapse. The miners initiated a heroic evacuation. The only way out was a slow, cramped elevator that could only hold a few men at a time. As the water chased them through the dark tunnels, the miners remained incredibly disciplined, ensuring everyone got to the elevator. Miraculously, all 55 men reached the surface before the mine was totally consumed. The science of the collapse. How did a 14-inch drill bit destroy an entire lake? It was a simple, tragic miscalculation. Due to a coordinate error, the drilling rig had been placed directly over a gallery, a massive room, of the salt mine. The drill bit didn't just hit the salt dome, it pierced the roof of the mine. 1. The leak. Fresh water from the lake poured into the tiny hole. 2. The dissolving. As the water rushed in, it dissolved the salt, turning a 14-inch hole into a massive cavern in minutes. 3. The chain reaction. As the support pillars of the mine dissolved, the roof collapsed. This created a massive void that sucked in the lake water even faster. Over the next 3 days, the lake vanished. The air being displaced from the mine was forced out through the mine shafts, creating a 400-foot geyser of air and muddy water that shot into the sky. The aftermath, a permanent change. Once the water pressure equalized, the lake refilled with the salt water that had flowed in from the Gulf. When the dust and salt settled, Lake Peigneur was unrecognizable. Depth. It went from a 10-foot shallow lake to a 200-foot deep abyss. Water type. It changed from freshwater to brackish, salty water, permanently altering the ecosystem and the types of fish that live there. Landscape. Over 65 acres of land, including parts of the botanical garden and several homes, were gone. Texaco and the drilling company eventually paid out $45 million, over $160 million in today's value, in settlements to the salt mine and the local botanical gardens. The Lake Peigneur disaster remains a stark reminder of how a single decimal point error or a misplaced coordinate can trigger a chain reaction that swallows an entire landscape. But perhaps the most incredible part of the story? Nobody died. Despite the whirlpool, the reversed river, and the collapsing mine, every single person involved made it home that day.